I'm Caleb Bissinger. This is The Next Big Idea. Today on the show, I'm chatting with Nick Thompson. He's the CEO of The Atlantic, and he's just published a new memoir. It's called The Running Ground. It's about his lifelong obsession with running.
It's a story about being able to push back against these forces in life that should make you slower, that do make you older, but to go in the other direction.
His relationship with his brilliant, troubled father.
Part of the reason why I want to understand my father is to not be him.
And a shocking diagnosis.
I had a lot of knee pain, and I was like, well, if I see my doctor, he'll tell me I can't run the marathon. So I delay the appointment until right after the race. I go and see him, and forget about the knee pain. Who cares? What's this?
Whether or not you're a runner, and I'm not, the book and this conversation serve as a guide to finding that thing, a passion, a hobby, whatever you want to call it, that makes you feel present, which is another way of saying fully, intoxicatingly alive. That's all coming up. But first, a couple of ads.
Chronic spontaneous urticaria, or chronic hives with no known cause. It's so unpredictable. It's like playing pinball. Itchy red bumps start on my arm, then my back, sometimes my legs. Hives come out of nowhere, and it comes and goes. But I just found out about a treatment option at treatmyhives.com. Take that, chronic hives. Learn more at treatmyhives.com.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Kurt Vonnegut said that if you want to flatter someone, it's better to praise their minor secret vanities than their major accomplishments. So today, I'm going to praise the minor secret vanities of my guest, Nick Thompson. We are not going to focus on his role as the CEO of The Atlantic, where he managed to dig the 168-year-old magazine out of a $20 million hole and make it profitable. We are not going to spend our time together talking about his wildly popular LinkedIn video series, The Most Interesting Thing in Tech. Instead, we're going to talk about running. Nick moonlights as a damn good runner. At 44, he ran a marathon in 2 hours and 29 minutes, making him one of the fastest marathoners his age on the planet. He later set an American age group record in the 50K. He has run in blazing heat with ice tucked into his hat, and in frigid cold with Vaseline dabbed on his nose. He's run up sunny mountain trails and down dark city streets. He has run and run and run some more. His relationship with the sport is the subject of his new memoir, The Running Ground. It's a book about the fragile boundary between love and obsession, between progress and suffering, and it's about the way we all run in loops, away from the past and then back toward it. Nick Thompson, welcome to The Next Big Idea.
That was a beautiful introduction. Thank you, Caleb. That was awesome.
You have a big job, as I just alluded to.
Yeah.
It could not have been easy to find time to write this book, which means you must have felt like you had something you just needed to say.
Yeah.
What was it you wanted to get off your chest?
I had two stories I wanted to tell, or two things I wanted to explore. And the first was, how had I gotten so much faster in my 40s than I'd been in my 30s, which is not the way it's supposed to go. And as I dug into that, and we can talk more about it, I came to some very interesting realizations about the forces that slow us down and the things that hold us back. And so that was one story. And I thought it was an universal story because it's a story about being able to push back against these forces in life that should make you slower, that do make you older, but to go in the other direction. And then the second story is the story of my remarkable, extremely complicated father, for whom taught me how to run, for whom a big part of our relationship was running, who just has an amazing story of coming from where he came from, skyrocketing up the American meritocracy, and then what's the opposite of skyrocketing? Like crashing back down.
Yeah, in your eulogy for him, you described it as climbing the ladder of the American meritocracy and then spending the second half of his life destroying the ladder he had just climbed.
Yeah, that was my dad. And so I wanted to tell those two stories.
I'd love for you to read a passage. There's an excerpt that I'd love for you to read from The Running Ground.
I love that you selected this passage because it's one of my favorites, and it's not an easy passage to pick out. And it gets at some of the core of what I'm trying to do in the book, which is to explain how beautiful and how moving this sport can be. It's not a book just for runners. This is a book for people who don't run to help understand it. When you train seriously as a runner, you realize two wonderful things. You can't get faster by magic, and you do get faster with effort. There are ways to optimize and to train smarter. And there are times when you work and don't get the result you want. But really, to get faster, particularly in a long race like a marathon, you have to get out every day and run, even when you're sore, tired, cold, grumpy, busy, or all of the above. You have to run when you have problems with aches, blisters, cramps, diarrhea, exhaustion, fasciitis, grogginess, headaches, ingrown toenails, jock itch, knee pain, lightheadedness, menstruation, numbness, overheating, panic, queasiness, rashes, swelling, toothaches, unhappiness, vomit, wounds, and xanthomas. You have to run through swarms of yellow jackets, and you definitely have to run when you're zonked. One of the most important things to do in training for a marathon is, of course, to do long runs. Build up on weekends until you get to, say, 22 miles. But the deeper truth about training for a marathon is that you have to learn to run when you hurt, and you have to learn to hurt when you run. You have to learn to enjoy the pain. You have to convince yourself over and over that the goal is worth the struggle. You have to run when you don't want to, and you have to do the extra loop around the lake when everything is telling you to go back home. You have to believe in the process. You have to believe that brick by brick, run by run, your body and mind are getting stronger. You have to believe this on days where you ran slower than you did the week before. And if you want to run faster than you did before, you have to strain your body more than you did before. You have to build resilience so you can push yourself even more the next time you run. You have to search for that mystical sensation, the crux of this sport, where pleasure and pain blur into one. When you get there, pain means progress, and progress means pleasure.
I just love that. And Nick, here's how I picked that passage. After I read your book, I was sitting at dinner with my wife, who's a serious runner. Mm-hmm. And I just was reading her a couple of things I had highlighted from the book.
Yeah.
And I read that to her, and she cried.
Oh, my God.
And I probably should ask her this, but instead I'm going to ask you, why do you think that just hit her the way it did? What do you think it is about being a runner that you just spoke to her soul?
I think that running contains, holds, and releases very powerful emotions. It's a thing we do where you're out and alone, and you're doing it in intense situations, and you're learning about your body, and you're confronting aging, and you're confronting wonderful things in life and hard things in life. And so the emotions that get tied up, and my guess would be that she listened to that and she kind of understood or felt like what she feels deeply about running reflected in what I was saying I feel deeply about running. And that she felt like, this is my hope, that she felt that she was reading a passage from someone who understood the sport the way she does. And that can be rare. Like, you can talk about running, and sometimes people don't get it, even if they're runners. They don't quite understand like what it is you're out there trying to do. And so maybe she felt like this spoke to her that way.
Your dad introduced you to running. What was he like? You mentioned this earlier. He was a complicated character.
He's an amazing man. He's just this flurry of energy. I describe it at some point like the lights were never orange, they were never red, they're always green. Like my whole life, I never worried about waking him up. I never worried about time zone. With your parents, you're like, what time is it where they are? Like my mother, other people. He's just always awake, right? And he's always buzzing. He grows up in Oklahoma. He has sort of an overbearing father, doesn't get along with his father, he's scared by him, busts out, gets a scholarship to the school at Andover, gets a scholarship to Stanford, wins a Rhodes Scholarship. John F. Kennedy meets this kid who's this hurricane and says, like, you're going to be president before I am. Like the way people talk about him in that period is adulation, love, and a sense that the world was this guy's. Goes to Oxford, comes back, marries my mother, who comes from a prominent DC family, an amazing woman. So my dad's on track to do anything, and then it doesn't work. He begins to drink. He sort of can't really focus enough to do important academic work. He can't get a job in Washington. He thinks he's going to run for the Senate, but you can't actually just run for the Senate when you're 29 years old. And then, I'm born. My sisters are born. And then he realizes he's gay. And this is a very hard time to come out. This is the early 1980s, where if he'd been born 25 years later, he would have just come out when he was a teenager, right? If he was born 25 years earlier, he would have just stayed in the closet. And so he comes out, and it's this complicated process where he lets go of some of his ambition, in part because of his openness about his sexuality. And then he kind of goes nuts with his sexuality and just starts sleeping with everybody, right? And so there are all these inappropriate, terrible people. There's I kid you not, there are hundreds of people a year. There's a different person. He said he didn't spend a night alone for 20 years. And he's finding people on manjammer.com. He's picking up prostitutes at DuPont Circle. He's meeting people at parties. He's taking home the waiters and the gardeners. He moves to Asia, and he essentially kind of ends up running this semi-brothel. He's a tax fugitive. He's bankrupt. He's bumming money off me. So he's this force of absolute mayhem. He'll come to my house when I'm in my 30s and I'm working at the New Yorker and I've got these children. He'll show up and he'll just dump his suitcase, turn it upside down, and it's full of crumpled papers, bills, collection agencies, bottles of moisturizer, what, bottles of gin, what is the guy doing? So he's this incredible character who I stay very close to my whole life, despite the madness. And, he's the one who gets me to run when I'm 5 years old. I watch him run a marathon when I'm 7. He and I run together when I'm a teenager and in my 20s. I live with him in my 20s. So he's a huge force in my life, but not a simple guy.
I have a father who's a writer who's been, for my taste, uncomfortably public about his mental health struggles and his sexual appetites. And people sometimes say to me, how'd you turn out so normal? Do people ever say that to you?
My sisters and I talk about it. Part of it was we have an amazing mother who, and even my father accepted that the reason the three of us have gone on to healthy, stable lives is a large part because we have this mother. And I describe my dad as the storm and my mother as the lighthouse. And she's just can carry any burden. She can put everything on her back. And she provided a stable home that served as a counterpoint and sent us all to the best schools and nicest schools and watched out for us and made sure we're on time to all of our soccer practices. And was this constant source of love, support, and what we needed when my dad wasn't giving any of that.
You quote from his unpublished memoir where he says this kind of devastating thing. He says that when the cup of life is closest to the lip of fulfillment, that's when he felt the impulse to throw everything away is the greatest.
Oh, I love that you like that line. I love that you saw that. I don't think that, is that true? It's a beautiful line, right? And it describes something in his life. So he, as I said, had a really hard time in the 1970s with his political ambitions. And then Reagan comes into office. And my dad is close, right? He is close to becoming the person he thought he was supposed to be. And in fact, I was sent a memo by a historian who found a document where my dad was listed as the number one choice to run the policy planning staff at the State Department under Ronald Reagan. And then the name is right above it in pencil is written Paul Wolfowitz, who got the job. My dad never knew he was that close. But he did get a good job. He is becoming prominent. He's a young Cold Warrior. And that is when he comes out of the closet, starts living this completely different life, starts, descends into mania. And it's also, it's the period of AIDS, right? He's coming out as this incredibly promiscuous gay guy in DuPont Circle, right when the AIDS horror hits.
And is misdiagnosed at one point as HIV positive. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a hard moment in my life. I don't spend a lot of time on it in the book, and I don't know how that shaped me, but he was, when I was 9 years old, 10 years old, he tells me he's going to die, right? And just flat out tells me he's going to die. We're driving in the car. And what does that mean? We're all going to die. You know that when you're 10. He's no, I'm going to die, and I'm going to die soon. And, you should be okay. And you have all these wonderful skills. And I love you very much. And I was what? And he had been diagnosed as HIV positive. And then, a year later, he goes into a study of HIV positive men. And it turns out he's not HIV positive. And he gets a call from Anthony Fauci, of all people, who's, running the AIDS program. But I think that the misdiagnosis, he would later say it saved his life because it made him less promiscuous, more careful, more aware in that year. And that was probably that was very early in his full coming out as gay. That's 1985. So he divorces my mother 81, 82, and he, dates men and women for the next 2 or 3 years. And then it's like all men from then on. And I think that having been aware of like how close he came, I think you probably kept him alive.
You have your own experience with diagnosis and shifting diagnoses, which we can talk about in a little bit.
Yeah.
But 1982, that same year that your dad divorces your mom, that he detonates his life, to use your word. He also runs the New York City Marathon.
Yeah.
And you're there to cheer him on. And that scene comes up again and again in the book. Why was it so important to you?
My dad could have left and I could have lost him. He moved to Washington. I went to school in Boston. He wasn't he was suing my mother all the time. Like I could easily have just ended up not at all connected to him. And I don't quite remember why I went down there. My mom didn't take me. It was a nanny who took me. I don't know exactly how it worked out. But I remember him training for that race, and I remember watching him. And then I wrote a little essay about it in the school essay book. I mean,
you were maybe 7 at the time?
Yeah, but what's interesting is that I remember writing the essay when I was 7, but I must have written it when I was 10 because it's in the 85 school yearbook. So the memories must have stuck with me. But I just remember being so proud of him. He had run this race. I remember he looked great. I remember giving him this orange juice and a pair of shoes and wanted to break 3 hours. I remember finding his time, he finished in the top 5% of the race or whatever it was, 10% of the race. And it just seemed great. It seemed magical. He'd run a whole marathon. And that was my first real experience with running. And then, of course, the goal that he had set, breaking 3 hours, became my goal when I was in my 20s. But that race comes up over and over and over and over again in the book because it was such an important moment of my connection to my father. When my father died, the little essay I had written, I found on the wall of his house in the Philippines, right, in his bedroom. Right? He cared immensely about that. He was very proud of it. I was very proud of him. This is a very important connection.
You just said that you were proud of him in that moment in 82 and at a time in your life, his life, where I think there were not a lot of other reasons why you might have felt proud of your dad at that time. You go off to high school, you go to Andover following in your dad's footsteps. You join the track team. Did you want him to be proud of you the way that you were proud of him? Is that why you pursued track?
No, it's not. I did want him to be proud of me. That's why I went to Andover, right? And that's why I had expectations of success at Andover. But I joined the track team because I was cut from the basketball team. I had been not a basketball star, but I had been captain of the basketball team in 8th and 9th grade. I thought when I went to Andover for 10th grade, I'd make the varsity. And I show up at Andover, I try for varsity. And then I get cut from varsity. And then I get cut from JV. And then I get cut from JV2, right? It's pretty embarrassing. And the only sport you could join was track. And you had to do a sport. So suddenly Nick, who's actually not doing very well at Andover, he's in a weird dorm. He's not doing that well academically. He's not really fitting in socially. And he's just gotten cut from the JV2 team where he probably was the only person who tried out for varsity who got cut from JV2, kind of a loser, joins the track team.
When did you know you were good at running?
I can very specifically date that question in a way. So I start on the track team and I'm not that good. I run a lot of races and they're all, I run the 2 mile because the coach looks at me and you're if anybody who's not watching this visually, I'm thin.
The word beanpole might come to mind.
I'm lean. Okay. And so the coach is you run the 2 mile, the longest race. That's where the skinniest people go. So I start running it and it takes me 11 and a half minutes to run 2 miles. Cool. That's not that good, right? Everybody can do that. There are probably 5 kids on the team who can do that. There's one kid who runs much faster. And then, and this is one of the weird magical moments in my life, the coach signs me up to run in the New England Championships. And he could have picked any of the 5 of us, but he picks me. And the track is kind of a weird size. And so I've planned to run 11:30. Maybe I'll run a little faster. And that means 5 minutes and 45 seconds per mile. And I remember, I think it was 21 and a half seconds per lap on my track. And so I go out and I run, and I probably am running 21 and a half seconds per lap. I'm I'm doing well. But it's weird because I'm actually in 3rd place or 4th place in the race where I should have been in 15th place. And then I go through the mile and they call out 5:24. 5:24, wait, what? But what are you going to do? You just keep going. And then I finished in 10 minutes and 48 seconds and I could not believe it when I crossed the finish line. Not that 10:48 is a spectacular time, but if you had asked me beforehand, what are the odds that you can run 10:48? I would have said 0 out of a billion. It's not conceivable that you can do every workout and everything at 11:30 pace. And I had never run a mile that fast, much less 2 miles. And so suddenly I realized, I guess I am good. That was like completely transformative. And from then on, at least until I got to college, I was good. And then in college, I got bad again.
You say that I had been no one and now I was someone, I think, following that race. I mean, that just must have been absolutely intoxicating as a teenager. Completely.
And, you're not just a teenager, right? Like, you're going to one of the most competitive schools in the country. You're living alone from home, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody who is there is like a straight A student, a star athlete, or both. And you show up in this dorm, and there are like 8 people in my dorm. There's like an amazing musician. There's like the captain of the football. Like, there's just, everybody is just like crazy. And, and so like your positioning in this school is kind of complicated socially. And like, I wasn't good at anything. Like I was like a bad guitarist. I wasn't doing well in French class. And I've been cut from the JV2 basketball team. But like now I'm the sophomore record holder and there's like a little thing in the paper about me. And my friends are like, whoa. And the girls are like, that's cool. It's not that cool, right? It would have been cooler to make the varsity basketball team, but it was something.
Let's take a quick break. I'll be back with Nick Thompson right after these ads. You graduate, you go to Stanford, as you mentioned, you ran a little bit there, sort of unsuccessfully, but you went on to have a quite successful career. I mean, you became a senior editor at The New Yorker when you were pretty young. You later became editor-in-chief of Wired magazine. And you were still running and still clocking impressive times. I mean, you beat your dad's New York City Marathon 3-hour mark. Was he jealous of your professional and athletic accomplishments?
No. And this is like, he had many, many sins in life. And this is actually really important. When my father started to do well, his father was jealous. And his father, whose career fortunes plummeted when he was about 40, and he became an alcoholic and really struggled. Like, he wasn't someone who was able to cope with his diminishing fortunes. He kind of took it out on my dad. And my dad has all these diary entries from the 60s. And he's like, my father feels like my successes are his losses. And there was a real competition between the two. And my father would later say that was the hardest thing he ever dealt with in his life. And weirdly, he visited many of the sins of his father upon me later, but not this one. I never, ever, 1% got the sense that he resented that I was becoming successful in these things that he had also done. Like, he would have loved to have written for The New Yorker, and I was an editor at The New Yorker. He wanted to break 3 hours, and I'm running much faster. He loved it. The other thing that was on the wall in his house when he died, I go in there, there's lots on the wall, but like the 2 things about me are that essay about running and a photograph of me breaking 3 hours in the marathon for the first time. He was really proud. Like, everything I did well, he was excited by, and everything I didn't do well, he would like kick me in the head and tell me to do better.
But he doesn't he say at one point, I can't remember if it's in a letter or in a diary entry, it must be in a letter, where he says something to the effect of, you've risen much higher than I could have given my sexual orientation.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting reading of that line.
Which I do read as him saying, well, maybe if things had been a little different for me, maybe I could have risen just as higher than you, Nick.
He might have been saying that, right? So this is a letter he writes shortly before he dies, and he's kind of blaming his homosexuality on his lack of huge political success or professional success. He was an academic and a professor, and he didn't write the kind of books that he wanted to write, and he didn't run for office, and he was never head of the policy planning staff. I didn't get the sense that he was saying, you've succeeded because you're straight and I didn't succeed because I'm gay and I resent that. I just read it as him saying it's kind of like as a fact.
Yeah.
Right? Like, had I not been gay, everything might have been different for me. But I didn't see that at all as him being competitive. But that is some close reading there, Caleb.
It also seems like something your dad struggled with maybe was just like finishing things, right? Like, there were a lot of unfinished novels and unfinished manuscripts and aborted dreams. And you strike me as a real finisher. I mean, you run a lot of races in this book and you drop out of a few, but by and large, like, you make it to the finish line. Like, I wonder if do you read anything into that contrast?
Oh, 100%. part of the reason why I want to understand my father is to not be him. We are so similar in so many ways. And my older sister and I had this amazing car ride once where we both admitted to each other that our biggest fear in life was becoming like our father. One of the things, and this gets at one of the questions I didn't quite resolve, is when my dad stopped being a finisher, like when he stopped getting things done. I had always assumed it had been kind of when he started really drinking in the 70s and, maybe even when he came out and was doing his sexuality in the 80s. And then I went back and I read all of his records from his time at Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar. And the Dons are ripping him apart for not finishing things and saying, interestingly, they're like, he shouldn't be an academic. He's not like smart and thorough enough. He should be a journalist. They tear him to pieces in letter after letter after letter. That made me think, wow, I wonder whether actually he always had this problem and it was somehow masked when he was, an undergraduate and then like really started to come out when he was at Oxford.
It's interesting, actually, that you bring that up because it reminds me of a conversation that you have in the book with David Remnick. You're up for a job at the New Yorker, and Remnick calls you into his office and is basically like, look, we like you, but we're concerned that you don't have focus, that you have too many projects going on, that you're going to want to be on TV and you're going to want to adapt things into screenplays and you're going to want to start companies on the side. And like, this is a job about sitting at your desk and taking a manuscript and making it better. And we're not sure that you have that in you. It almost sounds like the same critique that your dad got at Oxford.
Yeah. One of the funny things in the book is I tried to make like every scene. There are 1,000 things. Like if I were writing a memoir of Nick's life, there are 1,000 things that David Remnick said to me that I would put in. But I only wanted to put in things that tie to my father. And you have to read it carefully to know that. But that is exactly why I put that in there. It is what David said to me. It was this very intense moment where they had almost hired me. It was my dream. I love the New Yorker. And they had almost hired me in, might have been like November of 2009. And then they hired somebody else. And then... Which,
by the way, is very similar to the scene you describe about your dad, right? Being the runner-up for a job in the White House and his name being struck out at the last minute.
It's a very funny story where, I'm a senior editor at Wired and I get a call from the New Yorker. I apply and I take the edit test and I can tell they like me, but they're not sure because they keep making me redo stuff. I'm like, you edit like this other piece and edit this piece and do this and do that and like jump over this hurdle and stand on your head. And then I get an email and they haven't hired me and it just breaks my heart. And so then like 2 months later, I'm at a party and this woman, and she's like swaying side to side. She's clearly lit. And she's like, who are you? I'm like, Nick Thompson. She's like, oh my God, I work at the New Yorker. And she's like, she's an assistant to one of the people in management. And she's like, oh, they were so close to hiring you. And I remember like being like super upset when I left the party. But then 2 months later, I was like, you know what? That's actually good intel. And so I was going to take another job. And I wrote to Pam McCarthy, who's David's deputy. And I was like, hey, I know you almost hired me. Now you should hire me because otherwise I'm going to go work at one of your rivals. And she's like, come on in. And then I have that conversation with David. And David like basically says to me what the Dons at Oxford were saying about my father. Clearly you have energy. Clearly you have promise. Like clearly you're like smart and fun to be around. But I don't actually believe that you can sit at your desk and focus. And so then I like spent the next couple of days like trying to convince him I would sit in the chair. The funny thing about this story is he hires me. And then like a year and a half in, he's like, okay, now like go run the iPad app, go run the iPhone app, like help us digitize the archives, like go do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so he ended up like kind of flipping it around because he realized where my skills were.
It does sometimes feel like the process of growing up is the process of figuring out what have you inherited from your parents.
Yeah.
What do you want to jettison and what do you want to hold tight to?
Yeah. It's what I struggle with, like that conversation with my sister, right? Like, I wish I had, and I aspire to have, my father's like joy in living, right? And his like love of experience and his, people just adore that man. It's going to be very interesting when my book comes out and people read about him and like, I'll get letters from people who just love that man so much. And also letters from people who he owed money to, right? Like there's a complicated balance. But you want to take that. But I also like am desperate to not become completely unspooled. So that's one end of it. And then I think about my children, right? Where what is the example I'm setting them? Like, what is it that, I had a conversation with one of my sons And, you know, I don't know, we were driving back from soccer practice. It was like 9:00. He's finished a hard practice. I was like, do you want to listen to a podcast about AI? And he's like, Dad, you have to learn to relax, And what is he going to take from me? What is he not going to take? What is he going to take? And what is he going to reject? What is he going to, when he looks back? And you never know, right?
Yeah.
I tell a story, one of the stories in the book, which is, maybe it's like a slightly overbaked version of this, but I run a race and I come back. It's during quarantine, right? So I run 26.2 miles by myself in Prospect Park. Right? And I crush myself. And I come back and I'm like a zombie. And the house is like 75 degrees. And I'm like with a space heater underneath all these blankets, like shivering and convulsing. And my eldest son is like, I'm never going to run. Like, this is crazy. And then the next day I see my youngest son, who then was like 6, like running 2 miles in Prospect Park. So like one kid had been inspired by this and the other kid was like, hell no.
After the break, a glorious victory.
After like 10 years of trying to run a fast marathon, I finally done it.
It's followed by a horrifying setback.
They're going to like slit your neck to take this thing out.
In 2005, when you were 30,
Yeah.
you ran your fastest ever time at the New York City Marathon, 2 hours and 43 minutes.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks later at your annual physical, your doctor found a lump in your throat, which turned out to be thyroid cancer.
Yeah.
I hesitate to put it this way because I don't want you to think I'm at all making light of the situation, but there just is something so bitterly ironic about it, right? That you just had this moment of pure vitality, a personal best in a marathon, and it was followed so quickly by such vulnerability.
I mean, the two things were utterly inextricably tied, even more so because I had supposed to see my doctor right before that race. And I had like a lot of knee pain. And I was like, this is a classic runner thing. I was like, well, if I see my doctor, he'll tell me I can't run the marathon. So therefore, I should just delay the appointment. So I delay the appointment until right after the race. And I go and see him. And forget about the knee pain. Who cares? Like, what's this? And it just, those two things are so wrapped up in my mind, the fast running and the cancer. Because it, like, once the diagnosis was clear, which was about a month later, that this was actually cancer, you can still see the scar, right? Then you have the realization, wait, I just ran a 2:43 marathon. It was a fast marathon after like 10 years of trying to run a fast marathon. I finally done it. And I did it with cancer growing in my throat. And then like suddenly it's like, well, wait, now what happens? And you go from being like, one of the cool things about running, right? And like when you run a fast marathon or like you run, and there isn't like some specific speed, but when you get to a point where you run a really good time for yourself, you have a bodily awareness, which is hard to describe. You feel, not just feel strong, you feel in control, right? And you feel like you're happy with who you are and how your muscles work and how your heart beats and how you stand and what your legs feel like and how your calf feels. And like, you're constantly aware of this. And you feel it as you get out of a chair and you feel it when you walk up the steps. You feel it all the time, right? And you feel great. It is really good to be in prime shape. And so to go from being in prime shape for the first time since I've been in high school, like to feel really good about my strength, to suddenly go from like, oh my God, they're going to slit your neck to take this thing out. And then you're going to have to like go into radiation and thyroid cancer, like it's not pancreatic cancer, right? You're going to get through it. And certainly if you're like a young male with this kind of, cancer, you're going to be okay. But it was a crazily emotionally jarring experience.
How did your dad handle your diagnosis?
Badly, like embarrassingly badly. He couldn't cope with it. I have all my emails from my father. It's a lot of the source of the book. I've always saved everything. Or saved all my emails. So I have like an infinite archive going back to the 90s, like to like 1994. And there are, 10,000 messages from my dad, right? We wrote basically every day. And I went back and like read everything in that period and there's like nothing. And he's like, he knows it's happening. He's just emailing me about all this other stuff. And like he just could not cope. He didn't come to New York when I had my surgeries. Occasionally he would like send a note like, hey, I have this friend who's a doctor. Will you send the scans to him, right? And he had done the same thing to me. Like when I was born very premature, and he thought I was going to die. Doctors thought I wasn't going to make it. And my mother like stays with me in the NICU and like was only allowed to like put her finger into the like plexiglass and like not allowed to put her hand, right? That's like, I think wear like a glove and put her finger in to like be connected to me. And her husband goes to Washington and like drinks himself into oblivion because he's convinced his son is going to die. And so he did this twice in my life where he completely abandons me. And, you know, he apologized for abandoning me at my birth, which of course I didn't know about. Like, you learn about that in stories. You don't know it at the time. But I certainly knew about it when I was 30. And I was like, come on, Dad.
Yeah.
But my mother was awesome, you know, and my wife was amazing.
When you recovered from thyroid cancer, why was it so important for you to get back to running almost right away?
Because of what you had mentioned earlier and what you noticed earlier, which is that it was so inextricably tied, right? And like I had felt like I had been alive and then I had faced death. And then if I was able to run again, I would feel alive again. And so when you're sick, it's all you think about, right? All you think about is the cancer and you're constantly worried about it and you're totally aware. And then you get better. And so you stop thinking about it all the time. But when I would run, I would always think about it because it was so tied into the marathoning, this feeling of vulnerability after this feeling of strength. And I remember a lot of things. I remember not being able to walk around the block. So that would have been, so the diagnosis with the New York Marathon was November of 2005. First surgery is January. Second surgery is maybe February, March. Remember in April, like not being able to walk around the block. And then I remember starting to run again. And then I remember in August, running in the mountains of Aspen, Colorado and being like, oh my God, I can actually do this. And then I remember in that next fall saying to Danielle, I'm going to run another marathon. And Danielle's my wife. And she was like, you what? And then I get back, I actually get pretty fast. And then I, in fact, run the 2007. So this would be a year and a half after the end of the treatment. I run that New York City Marathon and I run it at almost precisely the same time that I'd run before I got sick.
It must have just been this incredible feat, right? To feel that you had fully reconnected with the Nick pre-cancer.
Yeah. It's funny about that race that I kind of wanted to go faster. I was like, I'm going to break 240, you know?
Well, you always want to go faster. That's another part.
I mean, everybody wants to go faster. Your wife wants to go faster. This is like part of the nature of being a runner. We're all kind of psychotic in like very similar ways. Like sometimes some of the runners, again, very few people have read this book. It's not out. And some of the runners are like, the things that will catch their eye are these like tiny details about worrying about your contact lens when you're running, like the sort of the neuroses of runners.
Can I interrupt you and tell you just a crazy neuroses of runners story? Contact lens?
Please.
My wife was running at NCAA championships in college, 800 meters, and she makes it to the final.
Uh-huh.
And her contact lens fell out.
In an 800?
In an 800. And the disorientation of suddenly being partially blind, essentially, as she's rounding the last bend. Suffice it to say, she did not run the race she had hoped that day.
And that's like a race where it's all about vision because you're trying to like identify like how to cut in and like how to like elbow people off. And that's crazy, right? And like that's one of the things about running. You get so few opportunities. Like how often do you get to run at the NCAA championships and how many like weird things can happen? Like how many times you get to run the New York City Marathon, right? Anyway, so I'd started that race, wanted to run faster. But then when I finished, I'd run the last one at 2:43:51 and I finished in 2:43:38 and I was like, holy cow. And I remember sprinting at the end and I knew I was at 2:43 and I was like, I'm going to go faster. That was one of the best feelings of my life.
There has to be another side of this coin though, which is that there have to be things you've missed out on because you've been running. I'd love you to talk about that. Like what have you given up in order to run?
It's a really interesting question because obviously, I spend a lot of time at it and there are costs. And I can pretend that there are no costs. And I try really hard to minimize the cost. You know, a lot of my running is run commuting and I'm pretty efficient about how I do it and I take quick showers. But I think they're probably like, there's a lot of cultural stuff you miss, right? You don't go out, right? You don't go out at 11 o'clock, you don't drink, right? And you miss stuff, particularly in your 30s where, you know, I went home from the New Yorker every night. I ran home and I worked again. And part of it is because you have relatively little free time in your life and you prioritize your family time over your friend time and your social time, right? So what I hope I never left out and what I hope my kids never think is I hope they never think that I wasn't there for them because I was running. I do think I have friends who probably think that, right? And it's not so much because I was running, but it was because you have such little free time once you have a hard job and children. And if you spend that running, you're not going to spend it going to the Red Sox game. My wife, you know, I think loves that I run, But there are times where she's like, what are you doing? Right? Like, I was asking her this when I was working on this chapter in the book, and she was like, I don't know, that time we went to the pizza restaurant with the kids, it was like this really fun family dinner, and then we leave, and you're like, okay, you guys all go home in the taxi, I'm going to run because I haven't run today. And she's like, what the hell was that? And so there are times where she definitely thinks it's like taking up too much mental space or too much time. My sisters sometimes, we'll go on a family outing and be like, okay, everybody, we're going to go hiking today. And then like I'll have run like 25 miles before everybody's woken up. And they're like, and then I'm like, hold on, I got to like stretch. And I'm like a little sore. I'm like, come on, just come for the hike, you clown. The other thing I've given up, okay, this is weird. I used to be a musician, and I was a good musician. I made all kinds of music and put out some albums. They're pretty good. They're not amazing, but like I was a good musician. I made a living in my 20s playing guitar in the subways, weirdly.
Yeah, you were making like hundreds of dollars a day busking.
Yeah, I made a lot of money busking on the L train. And I've given up a lot. And music, running in some ways is selfish, right? You go out there and you're running, and if you're really good at it, you make all the other people come in one place worse. Music, you get really good at it and you make music, and people either can listen to it and they love it or they don't, right? Like music is generous, running is selfish in some ways. And I basically transferred all the time I spend making music to time I spend running. So that's like kind of on a surface level. Then the other like level is you create these habits, you have these hobbies, and the things that you do to do them like shape your whole personality. And so they're things that running does that shape your personality in a good way, right? So they have made me like more stoic. They have like that list that I read at the beginning. Like that's also how I approach my work. I just do my job, right? I start working on it. I don't complain about time. I learn to like focus. Like there's a lot of great stuff of the lessons I have learned from training really hard that apply well to work and probably make me a better, more generous person. But they also maybe make me a more selfish person, right? Because running's a selfish sport and activity. Like there may be habits that I've picked up on running that like aren't admirable. So that's what I've missed out on.
There's this one point in the book where you're like an up-and-coming editor, you have young kids at home, and you talk about going on runs at 11 o'clock at night and running all through New York City and finishing out in Coney Island as the sun is coming up. And I wrote in the margins, like, is he running towards something? Is he running away from something? Is he just weird? And it seems like what you were running toward are these 4 core states of bliss that you feel like you can achieve with running.
Yeah.
And I think this puts into perspective this lifelong, abiding passion, vocation almost that you have for running. What are those 4 states?
First off, on the running, I would often run at 11 o'clock at night, and I would often run as the sun rose at Coney Island. Those were often different runs.
Okay. I was like, that would have been a very long run.
Because I wouldn't be taking the subway home. Anyway, so there's one kind of state where you're running for like awareness, and you're just trying to be aware of your body and who you are, and you're trying to be present. And it's a little bit like meditation. And that is like a beautiful state to get in, and I can get into that state. Then there's another state where you're trying to, I describe it as like running not to seek shelter, but to seek the storm. And you're running to like break through whatever's in your mind. And I quote a friend of mine, Michael Joyner, who was like a 220 marathoner and a great physiologist, who when he was going through a divorce, like would run because he needed to do something that caused his body as much pain as his life was causing him right then. And so it's this way of like, it's this intense emotional experience you can get from like just pushing yourself to the absolute limit, like out on a track, like running a mile as hard as you can, as a way to like, whether you're proving yourself that you can make yourself hurt or whether somehow the hurt of one kind cancels out the other. Then there's like flow state, right? And that's where you're running and you're running fast. And this you can reach, but it's hard. And for me, it's like, it used to be like running 10 miles at 5:50 pace, or like now it's probably 10 miles at like 6:05 pace, right? Where you're out there and you're running hard, where like you're right at the red line, right? Like, and you're going as hard as you can go without hurting, right? Or like you're hurting a little bit, but you're not like tipping over. Like there is a line. And when you start to get there, all these bad things start to happen to your body, and you want to like stay right on the edge of the line. And there are times where you like have such self-awareness and you can do it. And it's this flow state that you can get in other forms. I get it in music, you get it in reading a beautiful book or thinking. There are lots of ways to reach it. And then the last is this, the state that I kind of describe in that little passage I read, where you just are like, your whole mind, it's kind of at the end of a race, and everything in your mind is about moving forward, right? And you've shut everything off. Your peripheral vision is gone. Like your hearing is gone. Like sometimes at the end of a marathon, people will be like, "Go, Nick." And you'll be like, run right by them. And they'll be like, "We saw you were so happy." And I was like, "Huh?" Like, I didn't hear you, right? Like you're all you can think about, like your foot goes forward and you feel yourself. The last time this happened to me, I was running this 50-mile race in Lake Warramug, and I was trying to set the American record in the 50-mile run. I had it like through 44 miles, maybe 45 miles, maybe 46, right? And I just couldn't get it. And I remember like the end of that race, there's a photo of me and I put it in the book, and you can just see that like their tears are like streaming down my face. I'm completely contorted. Like I look like I've just been through like all 7 layers of hell. But it was this kind of amazing state those last few miles where I was like, I am going to like try to just become as in touch with the road as I can. I'm like all alone. I'm running around this lake in Connecticut. It's like cold and windy, and I'm probably not going to get my goal, but I'm doing everything I can. And it's an incredible state to get into.
And do you feel like that purity of experience, that presence mixed with pain, it must be an antidote to the complexity of your daily life, right? I mean, I'm sure that like at work, you're juggling all sorts of questions and problems and 9 meetings at once. And to be out there and just right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot has to be just the most pleasurable antidote.
Absolutely, right? And like, my life is this just crazy, my Trello board of to-do list is crazy, right? Because you're not just, working and doing this. You have all the other responsibilities that come with life, and you're hosting party and you're serving on boards and you're inviting people to this. And then you're getting the kids to and from soccer practice and you're making breakfast and you're doing all those things and you have it all like arranged. And it is great to be able to just be outside and like relax and get out of it. But the presence is key. Presence, like I feel like having a hobby where I used to think about this with music, where like, if you can get inside the song and like you can really feel like you're inside what you're playing, and you're not thinking about what the audience is thinking about, and you're aware of what, like, I don't know, if trumpet player is playing, but you're just really inside the notes, inside the music. You're there with the guitar is part of you. That is a great feeling, and running can get you to something similar.
When we come back, we zoom out.
It's a really good lesson for everything in life. Like sometimes you just have to say
what? Stay tuned to find out. You've been talking about your dad in this conversation in the present tense, but he died in 2017. And about a year later, you get an invitation from Nike to partner with one of their elite coaches to see if they can whip you into shape and make you an even faster marathoner. And they did. You end up getting a lot faster, which is not something many people can say in their early 40s. What did they do? What was the technique?
I didn't understand at all the consequences of it when I started, right? I got this email, hey, we're Nike, we pair like regular runners with elite coaches. Clearly they had reached out to me because I was the editor of Wired. I go on this conference call. This guy, Steve Finley, this guy, Joe Holder, and this guy, Brett Kirby. And they then huddle afterwards. They ask about my training. They ask how fast I run. And then they talk afterwards. And as they later recounted to me, I just run a 2:43 marathon. They're like, Nick should be faster than that. Like if you look at what he ran when he was in high school and you look at how hard he trains, and he should be faster than 2:43. So then the question was how to get me to be faster than that. And there's some simple things you can do. Like here's how you can train more without getting injured, right? Here's how you can train more efficiently. Here's what you can eat, right? That I didn't know about. And so they teach me some of this basic stuff. But what they really did, this was mostly like Brett's insight and Steve's actions, is they had to like trick me to believe that I could be faster. And that's not a simple process because it's not like, Nick, you can run a 2:29, right? I would have laughed at them. And so Finley, he's like, well, Nick is like scared of running faster than 6 minutes per mile. 6 minutes per mile is a 2:37 marathon. And I had told him, I was like, there's no way I could ever run that fast. So what do you do with someone who's scared of running 6 minute mile? Well, for one, you get them to run lots of miles faster than that. But two, you get them out on a track and you have them run less than a 5 minute mile, right? You get out there and you have them run like quarter miles or 200 meters. So when you look at your watch, it says, oh, you're running 4:40 pace, right? And you do that enough, and then suddenly you're kind of used to seeing 4:40 pace. So then when you're out there and you're running 10 miles and it says 5:50 pace, you're not scared. So Finley is basically getting me to reframe my expectations about how quickly I could go, but he can't tell me that's what I'm doing because that would break the experiment. And so he's like running this like psyop on me, and I get much quicker very rapidly. And so it's like 2 months after I start, I run a 2:38. And then like 6 months after that, I run 2:34. And then 6 months after that, I run 2:29, which is, I had spent 15 years trying to get from like 2:43 to 2:39 and not been able to do it. I mean, did it once, but like failed so many times. And then suddenly, 15 minutes. So that was the experiment.
And that's like one of the big, if not the big life lesson, I feel like, in this book, this idea that you can trick yourself to go faster. Yeah. You can trick yourself to accomplish more than you think is possible. And you apply it not only to running, but I mean, we were talking earlier about your time at the New Yorker, and there's this great scene where the Boston Marathon bombing has just happened, and David Remnick comes into your office and says, I want you to write about this, and you have an hour to get me back your copy. And you're like thinking, I can't turn something out that quickly. And he's like, I'm closing the door, turn off your phone, and I will have your copy in an hour. Yeah. And the same thing, like he tricked you into going faster than you thought was possible, right?
And that you sometimes have to do that. Like, and it's a really good lesson for everything in life. Like sometimes you just have to say, you can do this. In fact, whether you can or you can't, you're going to proceed for the next period of time as though you can. You don't think you can get this done. Okay, well, how about you start? And I'll come back in 2 hours. I've talked to my kids about this. Like, oh my God, I have too much homework. I can't possibly get it done. Okay, I have an idea. Instead of telling me how hard it is and you don't have enough time, why don't you start it? And then we'll figure that out, right? Or like with employees, like, well, why don't you begin this challenge and then see whether you can get there? The harder part is not just that. That's like more sort of motivational. The hard part is like really understanding someone as well as Finley understood me to see where I was blocked and then to like very subtly unblock that.
So I should confess, a grumpy runner. My wife will sometimes say, you can come on a run with me, but only if you promise not to complain the entire time.
I did not know, by the way, when you mentioned that first story about your wife, that she had qualified for NCAAs in the 800. Like your wife's fast.
She's a badass athlete. I am not. What's your advice for me? How can I learn to love running?
Well, so first, I mean, you probably already know this. You've been married for a while. You seem to have a very happy marriage. It's just like accept that your wife is going to do irrational things and is going to disappear for periods of time and that it's super healthy and useful and just let her do it, right? For you, you're going to have to kind of keep it separate from her, I think, maybe like not to do it with her, right? Because like that'll be sort of awkward.
What you're trying to say nicely is that she will smoke me.
No, and she'll like hang back and you'll feel bad.
Oh.
That's what's going to happen. Like she'll like try really hard not to smoke you. And then like you'll be upset that you've like worsened her workout. And then she'll be upset that you're upset that you've like worsened her workout when really she was trying to help you. And then it'll be like just a bad scene. What should you do? My advice is a little bit like what I said in the passage you picked out, which is just you go out and you do it. And you go and you like find 3 loops around Providence that you like, right? One's 2 miles, one's 5 miles, one's 8 miles. And you're going to do one or the other every day, right? And they're all beautiful loops and they're all cool. And, most days you're going to aspire to do the 5. And when you feel good, you feel like you're going to do the 8. And on a day you feel bad, you're going to do the 2. But every day you're going to do one of those things. And then you just start doing it. And then you kind of get in the habit. And then you start to appreciate it. And then you start to notice things on that 8-mile loop. And there's like, oh, that's a really cool lighthouse. And you sort of want to see the lighthouse again. Or you feel really good when you pass this particular area. And, just sort of like go out there, be aware of your body, be aware of your senses, be present in the run. Like think about your foot stride, think about like where you are, like every now and then, like stop paying attention to your eyes and just listen, or stop paying attention to what you hear and just look, or like smell, or like make yourself fully like, think about just the touch, think about what your foot feels like as it hits. Try to like track whether your toes are hitting, your heel is hitting, is your midfoot hitting. Try to run in a completely straight line. Like try to do, like just try to make yourself aware and present while you run. And I think you end up getting super interesting things about it. And then like, maybe 2 weeks in, time how long it takes you to do the 8-mile run. And then 2 weeks later, time it again. And you'll be like, oh, wow, like that's pretty cool, right? It took me, 80 minutes the first time and 78 this time. Now 2 weeks later, like that's pretty neat. Maybe I can do 75, right? And then it's this great process.
The science is pretty clear here, right? That like if you can run, you probably should run.
Unquestionably, right? Like if you can run and you can run 30 minutes a day, the odds of you living longer go up. Like all-cause mortality goes down. 100% unambiguous. The interesting scientific question is when you run as much as me, whether you cross some threshold. And that is intensely debated. And I perhaps delusionally siding with the studies that show that it's still there's no limit. But for you, unquestionably live longer, feel better mental health outcomes, better work outcomes, everything's better.
Will you ever stop running?
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to, but you never know. First thing that'll happen is that I'll stop racing marathons, ultras. I'll stop doing highly ambitious racing. I want to run a marathon with my son. I want to run the New York City Marathon with my son. He's 15 and we've run a 10-mile race together. He wants to run it when he's 18. And that so I will definitely run the New York City Marathon as soon as I have 3 sons. One of whom wants to run marathons with me. At some point, I'll stop running marathons. At another point, I'll stop running races. And then maybe at some point, I'll stop running. I suspect that I'll only stop running when I'm not physiologically able to, and then there'll be a period where I walk, right? I love it so much. It's so integrated into my life. I write about these different characters in the book who teach you about things in life through running. And there's one named Michael Westphal who he's an elite runner, wins the Northeast Harbor Road Race when my father runs it in 1981, I think, and he runs a 2:28, 2:29 marathon. And then he gets Parkinson's when he's 49 years old. He's this carpenter who lives on a tiny island in Maine and gets Parkinson's. And then, at first tries to hide it. He's embarrassed. He's the strong carpenter. How can he not be, and he's an elite runner. How can he have Parkinson's? And then he's you know what? I love running. I'm going to keep doing it. So he ties his hand behind his back and learns to ask for help when he falls and starts running marathons. And he runs I think it's 3:15 marathon with Parkinson's. Sets the world record for fastest marathon with Parkinson's. Unbelievable. He's coming in, he's qualifying for Boston. And this is not, he's in his late 50s. These times are incredible. And he's running these and he falls down at the end, and incredible guy. And so then his Parkinson's gets worse and worse. And he still tries to run and he's on the medication that makes it harder. And then I saw him, it's now 2025. I see him in the summer of 2024 and he's I'm done. I can't do it. It's the hardest thing. I tried to run as long as I could. I ran as long as I could. I've stopped. And I was very sad, I can't believe he lost this thing. He loved it. He did so much for him. I came back this summer after the book was done. The chapter ends with him saying, I'm done running. I come back this summer. I go and see him on Cranberry Island with my son. And we go and we spend, it's very hard a movement. His wife has just died. We go around the island. And then I was well, I'm going to go take my son and this is my 11-year-old. We're going to go run 2 miles on the road. And he's I'm coming with you. And he puts on his running shoes and he ran with us. And he's I'm getting it back. And he's I wonder how fast I can do it. I'm sorry, I'm holding you back. I was Michael, no, this is amazing running with you. And so I ran, a mile with Michael Westphal on Cranberry Island this summer. And it was a beautiful thing to be as he's he's making, deep brain simulation. Maybe it's starting to maybe he can do it. And I want him to run, I want him to run forever.
Well, Nick Thompson, long may you run. It's been such a great conversation. Thanks for being on the show today.
Oh, that was so much fun. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for reading it so carefully.
Nick Thompson's new book, The Running Ground, is out now. I also highly recommend his LinkedIn video series, The Most Interesting Thing in Tech. Just find it by searching for him on LinkedIn. By the way, I did ask my wife why she found that passage from Nick's book so affecting. Here's what she said.
I think it made me cry because I'm in the thick of training for the Ironman 70.3 World Championships, which is 11 days away as of this recording. And what Nick wrote is, to me, such a beautiful summation of all of the conversations that endurance athletes, and myself included, have with ourselves all the time about getting out the door or in the middle of a workout. It's hard and it hurts, and you have to remind yourself, you have to keep going. You have to find something within yourself to keep going. And his words made me feel less alone, and also articulated what I find most beautiful about sport, which is that you put yourself in a position to test yourself, and then you have to answer that question. Are you going to keep going or not? And I just thought it was really beautiful.
Oh, and I've been following Nick's advice. I found 3 loops. I've been doing them every day. I'm liking it. Today's show was sound designed by Mike Toda. Our executive producer is Rufus Griscom. I'm Caleb Bissinger. See you next week.